finding peace and happiness in the later stages of life. As we grow older, a question often arises. Where will we find peace and happiness in our golden years? Should we follow the tradition of living with our children and grandchildren, or should we pursue independence? These are not simple decisions, and each option carries its own emotional weight. The stories that follow explore the different paths taken by older adults and their families, offering insights into the complexities of aging gracefully. They remind us that while every situation is unique, the need for love, dignity, and fulfillment is universal. 1. Living with family. A blessing for some, a burden for others. In many cultures, the idea of living with one's children in old age represents a lifetime of mutual support, where parents who raise their children are cared for in return. But as we see in the story of Peter and his family, this arrangement is not always as harmonious as it may seem. Peter's parents had 2 sons and always imagined living with one of them when they grew older. His younger brother Adam even chose his wife Sarah, based on how well she would get along with their parents, believing that this would ensure peace in a shared household. Peter watched as Adam's previous relationships failed because their parents disapproved, often citing reasons like the women being not traditional enough or lacking domestic skills. Eventually, at 32, Adam married Sarah, who seemed to meet all of their parents' expectations. However, the peace in their household was short-lived. Soon after moving in together, generational conflicts began to surface. Peter's parents placed a high value on daily family meals, but Adam and Sarah, with their busy work schedules, found this difficult to maintain. The parents felt disrespected, believing their traditions were being ignored. Tensions escalated after the birth of Adam and Sarah's first child. Peter's mother relied on traditional childcare methods, which clashed with Sarah's preference for modern, science-based practices. As the conflict deepened, Adam found himself caught between his wife and his parents, unable to mediate effectively. Despite their best efforts to reconcile, the situation became unbearable, and Adam and Sarah made the difficult decision to move out, choosing their independence over the constant strain. The story highlights a challenge many families face when multiple generations live together. Differences in values, lifestyles, and expectations can create friction, making it difficult to maintain a peaceful household. Living together doesn't always strengthen relationships. It can sometimes deepen existing divisions. 2. The joy of multi-generational living. The Thompsons' story. Not all families struggle with this dynamic. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, for instance, live in a close-knit community with 18 children and grandchildren. Though each family has its own kitchen, they gather every evening for a shared meal. The routine of breaking bread together strengthens their bonds, and even those who live far away return regularly, drawn back to the warmth of the family home. For Mr. Thompson, the greatest joy comes from seeing his family happy, united, and connected. He finds peace in knowing that he can offer daily guidance and support to his children and grandchildren. The Thompson story illustrates that multi-generational living can be a source of comfort and security for elderly parents, provided that everyone's values and expectations are aligned. For many seniors, the desire to live with their children stems from a need for emotional closeness and the comfort of family life. This becomes especially important as health declines and social circles shrink with age. The fear of loneliness in old age is very real, and living with family can provide much-needed support. However, proximity doesn't always guarantee a deeper connection. As Peter's family story shows, without genuine care and mutual respect, living together can sometimes lead to greater conflict. 3. Choosing independence. The Harpers and Mrs. Lewis's stories. For others, Independence is key to maintaining dignity and fulfillment in old age. Mr. and Mrs. Harper, parents of 2 sons, surprised many when they chose not to live with either of them, even though both sons lived nearby in the same city. When their eldest son, Jack, got married, they gently encouraged him to start his own household. Having once been a daughter-in-law herself, Mrs. Harper understood the difficulties that come with living under the same roof as in-laws. This experience shaped their belief that once a son marries, he should establish his own home. When their younger son, Tom, got married and needed temporary accommodation, Mrs. Harper agreed, but only for 3 months. After that, she insisted they find a rental or purchase their own home. "It's not about being harsh," Mrs. Harper explained. "It's about thinking ahead. Different generations have different lifestyles, and living together for too long can lead to conflict." Now, the Harpers' elder son lives about 10 miles away, and Tom and his wife purchased a home next to theirs. The family gathers every weekend for meals, laughter, and togetherness. But Mr. and Mrs. Harper maintain their independence. They even plan to sell their large home and downsize to a smaller apartment as they grow older. If they become too frail, they will hire help or consider a senior living community, but they are determined not to burden their children. Similarly, Mrs. Lewis, a widow with 2 adult sons, has chosen to live independently, despite frequent requests from her sons to move in with them. She remains steadfast in her decision to stay in the countryside, where she has lived for decades. "I have friends here, and I enjoy the freedom," she says. "In the city, it's just doors opening and closing, with little interaction." When she visits her sons in the city, she notices how their busy lives leave little time for meaningful connection. They leave early for work, return late, and often spend their evenings on their phones or computers. City life doesn't suit her, and she prefers her village lifestyle, where she knows everyone and feels at peace. "If I fall ill, I'll hire help," she says. "My sons can visit, and that's enough." The stories of the Harpers and Mrs. Lewis reflect a growing trend among seniors who are choosing to live independently, maintaining control over their lives rather than relying on their children. Independence allows them to preserve their dignity while staying close enough to their families for regular visits and support. 4. Choosing a nursing home. A difficult yet empowering decision. For some, neither living with family nor maintaining complete independence is the best option. Moving into a nursing home can be a difficult and emotional decision, but it can also bring peace of mind and comfort. After her husband passed away, Mrs. Johnson made the bold choice to sell her home and move into a private nursing home. Her children were shocked, believing it was unusual and even shameful for their mother to live in a nursing home when they were available to care for her. They worried that others would think they were neglecting their responsibilities. But Mrs. Johnson calmly explained that her lifestyle no longer aligned with theirs. She would be lonely in their empty house while they worked, and she didn't want to be a burden. In the nursing home, Mrs. Johnson found companionship with others her age, had her meals prepared for her, and her children could visit whenever they wished. What started as a difficult conversation turned into an arrangement that allowed both her and her children to live more peacefully. Mr. Adams had a similar experience. After his wife passed away, his children insisted he move to the city to live with them. Reluctantly, he agreed. But after 2 years, he felt isolated and constrained, spending most of his days in front of the TV. One day, he saw a program about nursing homes and decided to explore the option. Though hesitant at first, Mr. Adams eventually moved into a nursing home where his health and spirit improved. He found companionship, daily care, and a new sense of freedom. Using his military pension to cover the costs, he chose to live permanently in the nursing home. His children were relieved, knowing he was well cared for and happy. The stories of Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Adams illustrate that moving into a nursing home is not a sign of failure. For many, it is an empowering decision that leads to a more fulfilling and peaceful life. These environments are designed to provide care, community, and support, offering seniors a dignified way to live out their golden years. 5. Coping with the loss of a spouse. Finding a new purpose. One of the most difficult challenges many seniors face is the loss of a spouse. Emma, 67, knows this pain well. When her husband passed away, she felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under her. "I cried myself to sleep for months," she recalls. "Every night, lying in our bed alone, the weight of loneliness was unbearable." For a long time, Emma lived in grief, withdrawing from friends and family. But one day, while looking at old photos of her and her husband smiling together, she realized something. "He wouldn't want me to live like this," she thought. Slowly, Emma began to rebuild her life. She started with small steps, taking walks, eating properly, and reconnecting with friends. Emma's journey from despair to a renewed sense of purpose reminds us that healing is possible. While grief never fully disappears, she found new reasons to wake up each day. Emma teaches us that it is possible to move forward without leaving the past behind. Instead, we carry it with us as we learn to embrace the present. Her story speaks to the power of resilience and the importance of self-care. Even after a profound loss, Emma found joy in simple pleasures and the company of friends. Her experience is a powerful reminder that life after loss can still be meaningful and fulfilling. 6. Conclusion. Finding your own path. These stories show that there is no single right way to navigate the later stages of life. Whether you choose to live with family, maintain your independence, or move into a nursing home, the most important thing is to make decisions that bring you peace and fulfillment. Aging is not the end, but a new chapter, a chance to reflect on the past, cherish the present, and create a future that aligns with your values. For some, this means living with their children and sharing their everyday lives. For others, it means seeking independence or companionship in a senior living community. Each of the stories shared here reminds us that the key to a happy life in old age is finding what works for you. Whether you seek the comfort of family, the freedom of independence, or the support of a nursing home. What matters most is that your choices allow you to live with dignity, joy, and love. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time, and may you find peace, happiness, and fulfillment in whichever path you choose to follow.